Hey, welcome back to Conversation with Jim Wallis, the author of the book On God's Side, What Religion Forgets and Politics Hasn't Learned About Serving the Common Good. Jim, thanks for being on the show today. Hot button issues are obviously where this stuff hits the ground. Like you're famous for saying to students and to your readers, look, this isn't an idea. This has to be a practice. We have to figure out how you live this. How does someone live the common good? How does someone live the agenda of God in a way that's generous and generative for others in the world? So it puts you into conversations about particular issues: the civil rights movement, war,
immigration,
immigration.
Guns.
Guns. I mean, a lot of really important things and not easy things, right? I mean, we're not. If these things were simple and someone knew what the answer was, that would be satisfactory to everyone. That it would really feel common and really feel good. We don't have those problems, right? Like drink more water. Maybe the milk industry is asking people not to drink more water, but other than that, people pretty much know, hey, we should all be drinking a little more water. So on these these topics that inflame people's passions because they care. They're a big deal, and gay marriage is one of those. You've come out recently to be supportive of federal legislation to allow for gay marriage. Is that right? Or
well, what I have said.
What are you thinking about that now? Because I know you get a lot of trouble from the religious right.
And the left.
I don't know if you know this, but the religious left, they're kind of pounding on Jim Wallis right now, right? Because they're like, hey, welcome to the party, Jim. We've been saying this for a long time. They're saying, Jim, Sojourners has not done enough, and you haven't done enough. It gets really personal, and it's hard. It's got to be hard on you. It gets really personal, like, hey, this has been a civil rights issue for a long time, and you run around with those hateful people like the National Association of Evangelicals and Richard Land and those guys, that you're consorting with them. I mean, I hear progressive Christians, liberal Christians saying, I read it today, saying, there's Jim Wallis thrown in with the haters, the most hateful groups in America around the issue of gay marriage. It's got to be impossible some days to figure the way to walk down the road.
Well, I say on this issue, first of all, I was asked at the Huffington Post, are you going to favor marriage equality? I said, let's unpack that. I favor, first of all, marriage. We're losing marriage in our society. Low-income people, but all of us. We're losing marriage, and we have to recommit, restore, recovenant to marriage, or the common good's in serious trouble.
Oh, interesting.
I lived in a lot of poor neighborhoods most of my life. Kids have never been to a wedding in many places, or a house where there's two parents. That's a common good issue. How do we recommit to fidelity, to monogamy, and to parenting? That's got to be lifted up. And I want to hear both sides, liberal and conservative, talk about that. That's where we start.
Yeah.
So there ought to be a common ground commitment to restore, recovenant to marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not where this argument starts normally. That's where I'm starting. Secondly, should same-sex couples have what I've always favored, equal protection under the law? That's an equal protection issue. Let's have theology have its own conversation, and equal protection. People who disagree on the issue of gay rights, or theologically, can support equal protection. So for me, for a long time, I thought civil unions might be adequate for all that. Yeah. I've not led in this issue, but a lot of younger Christians have. Yeah. My staff has. They persuaded me that, in fact, equal protection under the law now does require civil marriage. So
but for you, it's not the same impulse that would protect, that would put a circle around the poor and the vulnerable. You wouldn't feel like gay couples wanting to have their marriages recognized by the rest of culture equally and being societally supported doesn't for you feel like the same kind of biblical mandate of protection that you would want to circle around the poor and the vulnerable? Is it a different issue?
Well, it's equal protection under the law, to me, is a principle I've always supported. So particularly where there's what really breaks my heart is the gay bullying issue.
I was going to ask you about that, because the vulnerability of a teenager who's either called gay or is gay, it is
right. So
suicide's a big problem in that community.
Right, and so we've been very supportive on those issues of like 40%. I heard today of Denver of homeless people in Minneapolis are gay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been
gay
very
and foster kids.
very supportive of those kids. So I talk in my book about this. I talk to my boys about this when the suicide happened out out west, and Jack, my 8-year-old, didn't know, and Luke, who was 12, did know. And so Jack said, well, there's a bully at our school, not a gay bully, but a bully. And I heard my older son say, Luke said to Jack, this is driving to school one day, Jack, you are an athlete, Jack. You're a good student. You are very popular. People like and respect you. Jack, you have to deal with him. Talk to him. Jack, it is the job of the strong to protect the weaker kids.
Yeah, how about that?
Jack, it is your job and my job at our schools to make sure nobody's bullied.
Yeah.
So that should be a starting place for people of faith. Now, where people I'm an evangelical, I'll still say that, so I wrestle with issues biblically. So there needs to be time and space for Christians to wrestle biblically with these questions, and there should be complete religious freedom and religious liberty for congregations to do that over time. However, I think there can be some common ground on the protection of the civil liberties of gay people. For example, we all know a lot of young people aren't going to church or leaving church because of how they perceive Christians treat gay people.
Yeah, right.
And that Jesus wouldn't do that.
I think there's another issue of vulnerability in this area, because like it or not, people are making families, and gay couples are making families. And another very vulnerable population are the children of those families. And if there aren't civil or legal protections for those families, they have to go through all kinds of legal craziness.
That's why
to try
equal
to keep their
protection
family
is really important. So,
but I'm just in terms of who's vulnerable here. Children are vulnerable if families can be broken apart, or if something happens to one partner and the child is a biological of one or was adopted. It can get really, really messy. And if there are other family members who don't agree with the partnership, these children who have maybe grown up with these same two parents their whole lives can be sometimes removed from families, and that's a lot of stress that nobody should have to worry about. It's another vulnerable group.
Christians that have theological issues or differences should be allowed to have that conversation, but dealing with those people practically in real life who are facing those issues is really important. Now, but there are extremes on all sides, and so I was attacked today because I was in a press conference with the NAE and Richard Land over immigration.
I saw that because of immigration,
which they're supporting.
Yeah.
And so all we're saying is the issue of immigration is we're trying to get a bipartisan commitment here, and this isn't the place to try to resolve the gay marriage question. When same-sex couples are included in the new immigration law, because they will be.
They will be. Okay, I think that was the question, people.
Well, they will be long-term, but you can't. You're not going to get the Catholic Church or Southern Baptists or the NAE to vote for immigration if it means voting for gay marriage at the same time.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about how you manage that yourself, where you might say, look, I want to see gay couples have equal protection, but I just know if we're going to get this passed in 2013 for immigration reform, we can't bake that into the...
I said that yesterday, and I'll stand by that. I said I'm for equal protection and marriage equality. This is the wrong place and the wrong time to have that fight. It's being resolved in other places, and if you make that an issue in this, then you're going to have all kinds of people who can't do that pull out. So we're going to lose immigration for 11 million undocumented people for an estimated 35,000 same-sex couples. And I'm saying flat out to my LGBT friend, I'm saying, now, if people want to raise this as an amendment on the floor of the Senate, that's fine, and let people vote. And if people vote this in, that's fine. I am in favor of extending protection to same-sex couples, but I don't want the LGBT community to force this issue into the conversation in a way that upends and defeats and destroys immigration reform. That would be, I think, not fair and offensive to the 11 million undocumented people whose lives need to be protected here. So I've talked to evangelical leaders, and I've said, when this is including of gay people down the road, are you going to go after that? Are you going to stalk that? Are you going to? And they tell me, no, we're not.
Yeah, we actually don't want to fight about that
we
anymore.
don't want to fight about that.
No, they really
they
don't.
don't.
It's really
but we just can't vote for it.
Yeah.
We just can't vote for it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's sometimes you shouldn't be looking for symbolic victories.
Yeah,
and
see,
that's what
is,
this
but
is.
This is where you know, when people put gay rights issues in the category of a civil right, then, as you know, because you get this from them all the time, they go back and say, "Hey, Jim, people were saying the same stuff back in Birmingham in 1964. They were saying the same stuff. Wait 5 years, don't wait 5 months. Let's not have this march right now. That's just going to make crazy." You know, President Johnson, he's working on it. We're going to get it in 5 years. Let's just hold tight. If I have those numbers right, I can't remember. Something like, 5 years down the road, maybe we'll get this. The Kennedy boys.
But this issue is being fought today.
It's different for you.
In the Twin Cities.
This is different for you?
No, in the Twin Cities,
Well, yeah.
this issue is being fought today.
15 minutes.
There's going to be a vote today.
The House of
So there are all
Representatives.
kinds of
I see.
places where this is being fought.
I see.
You're
So
This is
arguing
being
that
fought.
it's happening.
It's at the Supreme Court. It's being
No.
fought in all kinds of places
I
where
see.
this is the issue. But to put this issue into another issue,
To deal with it there.
immigration
Yeah.
reform, I think that's a mistake, and it
Right.
risks the lives of 11
Right.
million undocumented people. So it's happening in other places where this is the issue, and people
I see
should
what you're
fight
saying.
those issues where they're being fought. But to throw it into every other issue, when this could bring down immigration reform,
Yeah. I
and
see what
those
you're
of us who are in favor of marriage equality, many of us are against this issue being brought into the immigration issue because you'll end immigration reform.
Well, I
That'd
really
be a mistake.
appreciate the nuance of what you're saying and clarifying, and this is part of what you're talking about. It's in relationships, it's in conversation, it's in understanding. When
Right.
we come at each other with a desire to understand one another's position, have a civil discourse about it,
Right.
that we can
Yeah.
try to get at things and try to understand why we're saying what we're saying.
Right.
And it's when things get so politicized, or you say, "Oh, you were against that there," and you hear it in politics all the time, and it's complicated. And so I think that clarification is really significant.
And I'm saying to my LGBT friends, I'm saying, do you want to bring down immigration reform?
Because you think this will do it. It could do it. Has
Oh,
the
it will do
potential
it.
to do
It will do it. Do you want to bring it down over what becomes a symbolic issue here when the fight is happening on those issues elsewhere? The Supreme Court's probably going to end this in a few weeks.
And the
with
timing is
ending
just
DOMA.
Yeah, it's
unfortunate.
really
So
isn't it?
so let's talk about the common good here. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the common good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me throw one more at you, because I know you've written a lot about this in this book, and that is the whole bankrupt financial economy system of the United States. That we live in a plutocracy. What's the word? Not a democracy. but
Plutocracy.
A plutocracy. Thank you. We live in a plutocracy, right? We live in a world in which even the stock market, that people get. And I get a little rant on that, so you got to put up with this for 15 seconds. That people think like the stock market represents them. The value of the stock market is owned by less than 0.5% of the wealthiest people in the world, and they use all the rest of our money that goes in the stock market to make their own money. And they tell us that it's a really great thing that it's at 15,000, but it's the whole system seems to be built on the back of the oppressed around the world and the oppressed in this country, and there doesn't seem to be the righteousness of making things right. And I'm not saying we should divide up all the income in the world equally amongst everybody, but when people make money off of the failures of others and the system rewards that has to be spoken out against. And you've wanted to speak out against that and talk about that not only in politics but in other places.
There's a whole chapter in this book called Economic Trust.
I mean, what are we going to do
We've
about
lost-
that? Because churches, I mean, nobody wants on the wrong side of that thing, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't hear pastors talking about it. Instead, I hear pastors fully vested in their 401ks, and they're as thrilled as like everyone's getting a little taste out of this thing. So nobody wants to help the 30 or 50% of the U.S. population that suffers under it, and maybe 70% of the world population. Like, it's a real...
Well, between 2000...
If there's a judgment day, this one's coming up, you know?
Between 2009 and 2011, the heart of the Great Recession, the top 7% of the country in those 2 years increased their wealth by 28%. The bottom 93%, which is most of the rest of us, lost 4% in those 2 years of the Great Recession. The inequality is greater than at any time since the Great Depression, and the checks have destroyed all the balances in our public life. There are 3 pharmaceutical lobbyists for every member of Congress. I've had traders on Wall Street say to me, when our financial...
We should respell that word. It's like the nuns. They should be the traitors. But anyway, we'll call them traders for now. But anyway.
They tell me when the financial industry is making 12-15% of corporate profits for facilitating productive capitalism, that's our job. When we're making 47% of corporate profit, which is not what they do, that's a casino economy. Money making money and not producing anything. So I'm actually, people think, well, Jim is with those Wall Street Occupy kids, and I was with them. But 3 days later, I'm with the World Economic Forum. I'm the chair of the Values Council for the world, and I'm talking to business people who want to do good while they're doing well. They think that a corporate profit and loss for shareholders in the quarterly profit and loss is a narrow metric. They want to talk about stakeholders and workers and consumers and indigenous people say you make decisions today based on the impact on the 7th generation out. That's a different metric.
Who's working on that? I mean,
anybody? We've got a whole thing that we're launching. We launched last year. Davos
I love Sojourners, but I'm not sure it can solve this one.
A social covenant, and we've got. I met in town today with a business leader in town who's joined this, and it's how to replace broken social contracts with a social covenant. 3 values: human dignity, the common good, and stewardship. And we're having political leaders, we're having business people, we're discussing this for a year around the world. There's a whole chapter on this in the book, how we have to have a new economic conversation based on values. What are our values? And how this economy is destroying our values.
And it is. I mean, I think in 50 years we're going to look back on the structure of this economy like people look back on smoking right now, right? Like, there was a day in which doctors recommended it, but it was really, really bad for you. Right. And it is. There are few issues on which the church is as not silent, just totally unaware as the imbalance in the economic system and the banking system, and I'm not a Ron Paul guy, so I don't want to go to the gold standard, but boy, we are in some serious issues here.
And these are biblical issues.
They are
the
from
poor,
start to finish biblical issues.
The poor are talked about 2,000 times in the Bible,
and so are the wealthy, and it never goes well for the wealthy.
No. So this is a conversation the Bible speaks more clearly on than all the things that churches like to talk and argue about.
Well, and if God's on the side of the poor, maybe this is a great economy because God's on the side of more people, right? That's what the upside is. Well, at least the wealthy that seem to be oppressing the poor are smaller than ever. There's less of them than there ever
I heard
were.
an evangelical leader, a very famous one, the other day say, what outrages us? There's 25,000 children who are going to die again today because of totally unnecessary hunger and poverty. Does that outrage the Christian community as much as gay marriage does? And the same evangelical leader said, as far as I know, gay marriage never killed anybody. This is an evangelical leader saying this. So what is our focus? What outrages us? 2,000 verses in the Bible on the poor, maybe 12 on issues of so-called homosexuality. Whatever they say, let's wrestle with those texts. But my goodness, where is our focus here?
And if people like you are right, I think you're saying this, what we count as the poor is an undercount, because there are a lot of people who are living at the middle class that they don't live in a barter economy where they have grain and they're going to swap their grain out for some cotton. We live in an indebted society, or what we do is we manage our debt and we manage our credit score. That we have TV commercials with little jingles about make sure your credit score is the way it should be so you can get more credit later. We live in a world in which people might have access to resources, but only as long as those who want us to have access to those resources say it's okay.
Right.
It's the fact that people, I bought a lot of rental properties, 10 years ago.
Unfortunate.
I could buy rental property, the worst thing in my life. I could buy rental properties, literally bought rental properties without filling out a piece of paper. They just took the stuff I had on file. It was good enough. Now people can't keep their homes. They can't get a car. We live in a credit economy that is totally imploded, and now people are stuck having to fulfill and service debt. And people act like, well, that's okay. If you can make your payments, you're not poor. We have a whole new category of poor that's sort of on the horizon here that I think is really going to be a problem. Do you think so, or am I just talking like a crazy person?
Joel Hunter, who's a pastor in Florida, dear friend of mine, big mega church. He did a survey in his church in Florida, what the average debt was of his members. Now, this didn't count house debt or car debt.
Right.
It was just like
something that was maybe valuable.
Credit card
Clothes,
credit card,
food,
student loans.
You know what the average was? It's in the book. The $35,000 of debt. Debt has become. I've got a lot. I love to hear you go off. I want to hear more pastors go off like this on the economy. There's a reversal of our values here. At the end, the epilogue has 10 personal decisions you can make for the common good. One is be content with enough and not just what is possible for you to get. Very important question. Or my households chapter in the book about how parents will know what I mean when I say it feels like the market capital is aimed at Luke and Jack to elicit their appetites. So Joy and I want to replace appetites.
Luke and Jack are your kids.
My kids, my 14-year-old and my 10-year-old. Replace appetites with values. That's what Christian households should be doing, replacing appetites with values and challenging the bankers in our congregations. And and many of them know it's wrong. I was at Davos speaking one day, and this at dinner that night, this person says, "I loved your talk in the plenary when you said, what do you do when the invisible hand, Adam Smith's invisible hand,
right.
What do you do when the invisible hand of the market lets go of the common good?" I asked. You could have heard a pin drop in the room. I love that talk. It was great. I said, thank you. Aren't you a trader at Goldman Sachs?
Yeah.
He said, yeah. I said, didn't Goldman Sachs do products and policies that led to this Great Recession, this meltdown? He said, yeah. I said, what happens when you raise that back home? They said, can't do that.
Can't do it.
Can't do that.
Nope.
Well, we got to be preaching on Sundays about economics. Biblical economics says there is enough if we share it.
And we have to redefine the poor as if you have more debt than you can pay, you live in a debtor society.
Right.
And the biblical notion of poor is that you are indebted. That's why it seems to me the Lord's Prayer is best said when it's said with the ring of forgive our debtors as we forgive those. I don't know if churches can ever talk about this because churches, and I'm pastor of one, we're tied up in this. I mean,
there's money
we are
involved.
so we're gonna buy our building and we're gonna raise money and we've got to put it somewhere. And I'm telling you, I mean, we're not Muslims. We don't get to come up with our own banking system.
You know what though?
And find somewhere to put it.
But
we try to do socially responsible investing. Yeah. I'm like, okay, there's an oxymoron. I don't even know where that could
really
go.
Tough.
But when people want to make money, I'm just going to rant for 10 more seconds. When people want to make money by putting in the stock market, making money for not doing anything but risking, That is an unjust economy.
Right.
And then people are like, I bought Apple stock, and I can't believe Apple stock is collapsing. Like, why did you think you should make money off? Anyway, it's
so
I
Joy
don't
and
know
I,
when we're ever going to get around this.
Joy and I, when we saw what Bank of America was doing with the foreclosures, what they were doing to ordinary people, we had our little bank account in the neighborhood franchise of Bank of America, and we pulled it out. And we put it in a. There are responsible financial institutions locally, small banks or small unions, and we put it in a responsible local bank. And I wrote about it, and all these people. Well, our bank account didn't bring down Bank of America.
Yeah, it
but I'll tell you,
those greedy people.
If the denominations, the church denominations, took their pension funds out of those big banks, that would make a difference.
That would send a message. Just the Methodists.
We have social equity, as you said before. How are we using our social equity as a lever for change?
Yeah.
You know?
And this comes back to those relationships and collective actions, because you feel as one person, it's hard not to become very cynical and feel very hopeless as where we started, because you feel like you're just like this most minuscule drop in the bucket.
Right.
But yet, when we extend our community, when we look for the common good and collectively move towards something, we can make a difference.
This is what I hope. People walk into these meetings very cynical, and they always walk out saying, I feel inspired. And that's what keeps me going.
Good.
Here's the thing about hope. Desmond Tutu taught me this. The difference between hope and optimism is very real. Optimism is just how things look today and how we feel and how the headlines look, and it's cup half full, it's personality. Hope is not a mood, it's not a feeling, it's not a personality type. Hope is a decision you make because of this thing called faith. The Bible says, Hebrews says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. My best paraphrase of that is, hope is believing in spite of the evidence and then watching the evidence change. That's what this book's about.
And that book is On God's Side, What Religion Forgets and Politics Hasn't Learned About Serving the Common Good. Jim, thanks so much for your work, and thanks for